Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're attempting a philosophical thought experiment that I have to admit sounds a little bit ridiculous at first.
It does, yeah. But it leads us right to the heart of one of the biggest debates we're having in the 21st century.
It really does. How we move and, what kind of ethical footprint we leave behind.
We've been given this fascinating stack of sources that put an ancient Greek philosopher of all people in this incredibly modern bind. The mission really is to figure out a commuter's choice.
So the big question is, if Aristotle were alive today, needed a car, would he choose a thermal combustion engine or a shiny new electric vehicle?
And to answer that, you, the listener, have to filter all this modern tech through this ancient lens.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's not about horsepower or 0 to 60 times. We have to filter this choice through these really specific Greek concepts he used to define the relationship between humanity and creation.
Right. The two big ones are physis
In there.
and techne, which
Yeah.
is art or craft or technology.
So the challenge is filtering everything. Global supply chains, centralized power grids, through a system of ethics codified, thousands of years before the bicycle was even invented.
Exactly. We have to figure out what virtues matter most to Aristotle when he's, choosing his ride.
Okay, so before we get to the verdict, let's quickly set the stage. Who exactly is our commuter? I mean, we're not talking about just any thinker.
No, not at all. This is Aristotle, born in Stagira, a student of Plato for 20 years, and maybe most famously.
He was the tutor of Alexander the Great.
Which is so relevant here. It shows he was immersed in practical politics, the organization of vast systems.
So the idea of a global supply chain wouldn't have been completely alien to him in principle.
Not at all. He later founded his own school, the Lyceum in Athens. He basically systematized everything we think of as knowledge: logic, biology, physics.
But for our debate, the thermal versus electric, it's really his ethics and his physics that are, absolutely critical. We need to focus on two concepts that sort of act as his decision levers,
The first one is a concept called mesotes.
which translates roughly to moderation, right? The doctrine of the mean.
Precisely. For Aristotle, virtue is always the balanced path. You have to avoid excess and deficiency. So if a choice leads to this unrealistic sense of abundance, for him, it's flawed from the start.
And what's the second lever?
Autarkeia. It means self-sufficiency, independence.
And that's a huge one. For Aristotle, the ideal life, and even the ideal city-state, the polis, it's one that minimizes dependency on these complex, far-reaching external forces.
Yes, the ideal person is autonomous, not reliant on some distant, invisible power. So if a car choice forces the driver into a position of, excessive global reliance,
Or if it promotes this illusion of perpetual motion without any visible consequence.
he's going to reject it. Doesn't matter how clean it seems on the surface to us, the philosophical toolkit is ready.
Right. So let's apply those tools. When Aristotle looks at anything man-made, any techne, he says it has to respect physis. It has to respect nature.
And nature, for him, is this perpetual but also inherent and crucially local cycle. It's generation and corruption. Things are born, they grow, they decay, they end.
So a good piece of technology, a good craft, works with that cycle. It doesn't try to hide it or, artificially extend it forever.
Which brings us to the first big test for our cars, the self-sufficiency test. Autarkeia.
The sources suggest he would prioritize a type of mobility that ensures the individual isn't tangled up in these massive global dependency chains.
That really is the core of it. If the car requires continuous, centralized, and globally distributed artifice to even move, think lithium mines on one continent, rare earth magnets from another.
And these giant gigafactories linking it all together.
It immediately starts to violate that principle of autarkeia.
And then you've got the moderation test, mesotes. The choice can't promote what the sources call this dangerous illusion of perpetuity.
Or excessive comfort that sort of hides the real cost of consumption. If the tech makes it seem like you have endless resources or endless motion without a visible cost, that's a huge philosophical problem.
Why?
Because it prevents you from cultivating the virtue of temperance, of moderation.
Okay, so the sources take these frameworks, they apply them rigorously, and they point to a winner that is pretty surprising.
It's very counterintuitive for us.
And the conclusion is Aristotle, the father of logic, would choose the thermal combustion engine car.
The local observable engine wins the ethical debate. It sounds completely absurd to our modern ears, I know.
It really does. We're so conditioned to think IC equals pollution, EV equals progress.
But we have to set aside the environmental impact for a moment. That's a
Yeah.
concept that's totally foreign to him in our modern sense. We have to focus only on the ethical structure of the machine itself.
Okay, so break it down for me. Why does the combustion engine pass its tests? Let's
Yeah.
start with the energy cycle.
Well, the thermal car uses local combustion, and for him, that would simulate a contained, natural process. He might see it as a form of vital fire, or pneuma.
Pneuma. That's like internal energy, like breath or digestion.
Exactly. Something that drives movement from within. The engine takes a substance, gasoline, it visibly converts it to energy, and it consumes it. The whole event is localized and self-contained. It mirrors the natural processes he spent his life observing.
Okay, but I'm still struggling with this. You're telling me the guy who studied nature would choose the device that visibly pumps smoke into the air over the quiet, clean option?
I know. It comes down to autarkeia, self-sufficiency. The EV, by contrast, relies entirely on external recharge.
What?
It has this immediate, total dependence on a massive external grid. It's a profound violation of self-sufficiency.
If the grid goes down, you're stuck.
You're completely immobilized. The
Oh.
combustion engine, which you can refuel locally at a neighborhood station, represents a much simpler, less politically fragile dependency structure.
And then there are the virtues. This is the critical differentiator, according to the sources.
It is. They argue the thermal car aligns better with Aristotelian moderation because the consumption of the fuel is visible. You literally watch the gauge drain. The resource limit is immediately apparent.
And that visibility promotes temperance.
Whereas the electric car, it encourages dependence on this centralized infrastructure. It promotes an excess of comfort.
You just plug it in overnight. The consumption is hidden miles away at some power plant. It doesn't matter if it's coal or solar, you don't see it.
Exactly. The driver feels insulated from the cost of the energy. The whole EV system is a highly refined piece of techne that's designed to hide the resource consumption required to power it.
So for Aristotle, the real enemy isn't burning oil, it's the lack of visible limits.
Precisely. The ethical structure of the machine is more important than the material it consumes. The combustion process, while it uses a resource, is local and visible. And that visibility is crucial.
Because it teaches you about limits. It forces you to acknowledge misotes.
You watch the tank drain. You know you must replenish it. The act of consumption is finite and immediate.
Okay, but that raises the big, obvious, modern critique. Don't both cars require intense extraction? I mean, isn't drilling for oil a massive violation of physis?
That's a great question, and it's where the analysis in the sources gets really nuanced. It draws on his other works, like the Physica.
Yeah.
Aristotle absolutely understood geological processes.
So he knew you had to dig for minerals, or that oil came from the ground?
Yes, he'd categorize them as telluric transformations,
Yeah.
just processes within the earth. So for him, the initial act of extraction, pulling stuff from the ground for a necessary purpose, is basically a philosophical wash.
It's a minimal violation of nature in either case.
Right. Where they really diverge is in their consumption, in their end cycle.
Okay, so what's the key difference there?
Petroleum is consumed locally and visibly. You burn it, and it's gone. It promotes that virtue of temperance because its end is finite and observable. It's a closed, consumable loop that teaches responsibility.
But the EV battery cycle? That's completely different. It relies on a global network of lithium and cobalt mining, complex industrial recycling.
And forced external recharge from these huge centralized gigafactories. It creates what the sources call an artificial eternal cycle.
An illusion of perpetuity, that's the philosophical danger.
That's the danger, because the car is constantly recharged, and the battery materials are, in theory, meant for continuous recycling. The whole system promises this nearly infinite, seamless operation.
Which fosters the idea of unlimited resources. It makes the individual driver feel totally removed from the actual resource cost.
Yes, it's a subtle but pervasive feeling.
So it's the difference between buying a single log to burn in your fireplace on a cold night. You see it, you burn it, it's gone. You understand the limit. Versus, I don't know, signing up for a subscription service that delivers infinite heat from some invisible, centralized source.
That is a perfect analogy. One teaches scarcity, the other teaches perpetuity.
An illusion of it, anyway.
And that idea of perpetuity goes directly against the moderation, the misotes that he seeks in everything. The thermal car forces you to acknowledge limits every time you fill the tank. The EV attempts to erase those limits through complex, centralized, globally dependent techne.
And by doing that, it weakens the ethical character of the driver by masking reality.
That's the argument.
Wow. So, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the insight is that Aristotle's choice is ultimately an ethical one for the driver. He favors the finite ethics of the thermal engine
The local consumable visible cycle.
over the artificial perpetuity and the deep global dependency of the EV infrastructure. It's a choice for individual self-sufficiency over the promise of a big, centralized technological fix.
It's just a completely eye-opening way to look at modern mobility. Aristotle wouldn't care about the environmental label. He'd care about the dependency chain and the virtue of the driver.
So, what does this all mean for us then? I mean, if Aristotle chose the thermal car based on autarkeia, on self-sufficiency, how does our modern dependency on centralized grids challenge our whole concept of ethical mobility?
That's the question to ponder.
It doesn't matter if those grids are powered by fossil fuels or by renewables. Are we just trading one kind of dependency for another? Maybe one that's more subtle, more global, and less visible.
It's something to think about for sure. Next time you choose where to charge or where to fuel, you can ask yourself, am I choosing the ethical limits of misotes or the illusion of perpetuity?
We really hope this brilliant and interesting deep dive has been informative, connecting philosophy to the machines we use every single day. If you enjoyed this exploration and want more stories that challenge modern assumptions with ancient wisdom, please follow the channel.
Thank you for allowing us to dive into your sources.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.